Imagine being one of the richest men in the city, owning mansions, luxury cars, and companies worth billions, and yet discovering that the most important story in your life was happening right inside your own house, and you never even noticed it. One night, billionaire Ethan Cole saw something that made him stop in his tracks. His quiet maid, the woman who cleaned his floors every day, was secretly leaving the mansion at midnight. At first, he thought it was strange, so he followed her. Through dark streets, through the silent city, until her taxi stopped at a small old hospital. What he saw next completely shattered his heart. Inside that hospital room was a weak little boy connected to machines, barely able to move. And the maid, the woman who worked in his mansion every day, sat beside that bed, holding the boy's hand and whispering through tears, "Mommy is here, baby." That's when Ethan realized the shocking truth. While he was living a life of unimaginable wealth, the woman working in his home was secretly fighting a desperate battle to save her dying son, a battle she had been fighting completely alone. But what Ethan discovered next, and the decision he made afterward, would change 3 lives forever. And the ending of this story will leave you speechless. So stay with me until the very end. Because sometimes the people standing quietly beside us are carrying the heaviest pain of all. Welcome to Heroic Stories Hub. This is the place where powerful stories come to life. Stories of kindness, sacrifice, courage, and life-changing moments that restore your faith in humanity. Every story you hear here will touch your heart, inspire your mind, and remind you that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's world. So sit back, listen closely, and prepare to experience a story you will never forget. Stop right there. That was the exact thought that flashed through billionaire Ethan Cole's mind the moment he saw his maid quietly step out of the mansion at midnight. The large glass windows of the living room reflected the dim lights of the enormous house. Everything was silent, peaceful, and still, except for one thing: Sarah. Ethan stood near the curtains, holding a glass of water, when he noticed the front gate slowly opening. Through the security camera screen mounted on the wall, he saw her. Sarah walked out of the gate quickly, looking around before stepping into a small taxi waiting outside. Ethan frowned. Why would she leave this late? He muttered under his breath. Sarah had worked in his mansion for nearly 2 years. She was always quiet, respectful, and extremely hardworking. She cleaned every room carefully. She cooked simple meals for the staff. She never complained. In fact, she barely talked about her personal life at all. But recently, Ethan had started noticing something strange. Every few nights, after finishing her duties, Sarah would leave the mansion late at night. She never mentioned where she went. She never asked permission. And somehow, she always returned early the next morning before anyone noticed. At first, Ethan ignored it. His life was full of business meetings, investments, and endless decisions. A maid's private life wasn't something he usually paid attention to. But tonight, curiosity burned stronger than usual. Ethan walked closer to the screen and watched the taxi drive away. "Something isn't right," he whispered. He quickly grabbed his coat and car keys. Within seconds, he stepped outside into the cool night air. His expensive black car started smoothly as he drove out of the mansion gates. In the distance, he spotted the yellow taxi. Ethan kept a careful distance behind it. Street lights passed slowly over his windshield as the city looked almost empty at this late hour. What could she possibly be doing out here? He wondered aloud. Sarah didn't seem like someone involved in trouble. She was too quiet, too gentle. Still, something about her secret trips bothered him. The taxi continued through several streets before entering an older part of the city. The buildings here looked worn down and tired. Dim lights flickered from broken signs and small shops closing for the night. Finally, after nearly 20 minutes, the taxi slowed. Ethan's eyes narrowed as it stopped in front of an old hospital. The building looked small and outdated. The paint on the walls was peeling, and half of the outside lights were broken. "This place?" Ethan whispered. He parked across the street and turned off his headlights. From his car window, he watched Sarah step out of the taxi. She held a small cloth bag tightly against her chest. Her shoulders looked tense. She quickly paid the driver and hurried toward the hospital entrance. Her steps were fast and nervous. Ethan sat in his car for a moment. "Why would she come here?" he muttered to himself. Hospitals at midnight rarely meant good news. A strange feeling formed in his chest. Without thinking further, Ethan stepped out of the car and crossed the street. The hospital doors opened with a soft mechanical sound. Inside, the air smelled strongly of disinfectant and medicine. The lights in the hallway flickered slightly, casting pale shadows across the floor. Ethan walked quietly, trying not to attract attention. Ahead of him, Sarah moved quickly down the hallway as if she had done this many times before. She didn't stop at the front desk. She didn't ask any questions. Instead, she walked straight toward the patient rooms. Ethan slowed his steps. He didn't want her to notice him. Sarah finally stopped outside a small hospital room. She paused for a moment and took a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the door. Ethan carefully moved closer. Through the small glass window on the door, he looked inside, and the moment he did, his heart dropped. Inside the room, a small boy lay on the hospital bed. The child looked extremely weak. Several machines surrounded him, making quiet beeping sounds. Thin tubes were attached to his arms. His skin looked pale. Sarah rushed to the bed and immediately grabbed the boy's hand. "Mommy's here, baby," she whispered gently. Ethan's eyes widened in shock. "Mommy?" The boy slowly opened his eyes. They looked tired but filled with relief when he saw her. "Mom?" the boy whispered weakly. A small smile appeared on Sarah's face, though tears rolled down her cheeks. "I came as fast as I could," she said softly. She sat beside the bed and gently stroked his hair. Ethan stood frozen outside the door. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. For 2 years, Sarah had worked in his house every single day, yet she had never mentioned having a child, never once. The boy looked at the small bag she was holding. "Did you bring dinner?" he asked quietly. Sarah nodded quickly. "Yes, sweetheart," she replied, forcing a warm smile through pain. She opened the bag and carefully took out a simple sandwich wrapped in paper. Ethan felt something twist painfully inside his chest. In his mansion, the kitchen threw away food worth hundreds of dollars every day, but here, this child was waiting for a single sandwich. Sarah slowly helped the boy sit up. "Take small bites," she said gently. The boy tried to eat, though he looked extremely tired. Between bites, he looked at her. "Did you work a lot today?" he asked softly. Sarah nodded quietly. "Yes," she said. "But that's okay. I like working," she added quickly, hiding her pain. The boy smiled weakly. "When I get better, I'll help you," he said. Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. "You don't need to worry about that," she whispered. "Your only job is to get stronger." She gently wiped crumbs from his mouth. Ethan leaned against the wall outside the room. His breathing felt heavier now. He watched as Sarah continued caring for her son. She adjusted his blanket. She checked the machines nervously. She held his hand as if she never wanted to let go. After a few minutes, the boy looked sleepy. Sarah picked up a small storybook from the table. "Do you want a story?" she asked softly. The boy nodded slowly. "Yes,
"The brave knight story," he murmured. Sarah smiled. She opened the book and began reading quietly. Her voice was calm and warm. Ethan listened from outside the room. The powerful billionaire who owned companies worth billions of dollars stood silently in a hospital hallway, watching his maid read a bedtime story to her sick child. And something inside him began to change. By the time Sarah finished the story, the boy had fallen asleep. She slowly closed the book, then she leaned down and kissed his forehead. "Mommy will always be here," she whispered. Ethan felt a deep ache in his chest. He suddenly realized something that shook him deeply. The woman who silently cleaned his mansion every day was fighting a battle he had never even noticed.
Ethan didn't move from the hallway. The hospital lights hummed softly above him as he continued standing outside the small room. Through the glass window, he watched Sarah sitting beside her sleeping son. She gently held the boy's tiny hand. Her fingers slowly stroked his hair as if she was afraid to let go. Every few seconds, she looked at the machines beside the bed. The quiet beeping sounds filled the room. Ethan felt something heavy growing in his chest. He had built companies worth billions of dollars. He had negotiated deals with the most powerful people in the world. But nothing he had ever seen in his life looked as powerful as this moment. A mother silently protecting her child. After a while, Sarah slowly stood up. She carefully adjusted the blanket over the boy's small body. Then she leaned down and kissed his forehead. "Sleep well, my angel," she whispered softly. Her eyes were already full of tears. "I'll come back tomorrow night," she added. The boy didn't wake up. His small chest rose and fell slowly as he slept. Sarah stood there for a few seconds longer, staring at him like she didn't want to leave. Finally, she turned and walked toward the door. Ethan quickly stepped back into the shadows of the hallway so she wouldn't see him. Sarah walked past him quietly, unaware that her employer was only a few feet away. Her steps looked heavy and exhausted. She stopped at the nurse's station down the hallway. A middle-aged nurse looked up from her desk. "Oh, Sarah," the nurse said gently. Sarah tried to smile. "Hi, I just wanted to check on him again," she said quietly. The nurse's expression softened with sympathy. "He's resting for now," she replied. Sarah nodded slowly. Then her voice dropped lower. "Can we talk about the surgery?" she asked carefully. The nurse sighed deeply. Ethan's ears sharpened as he listened from around the corner. "We've already discussed this, Sarah," the nurse said softly. "I know," Sarah replied quickly. Her fingers twisted nervously together. "I'm still saving money. I'm working as many hours as I can," she explained. The nurse leaned forward. "The doctors are worried," she said quietly. Sarah's breathing became shaky. "How much time do we have?" she asked slowly. The nurse hesitated. The silence in the hallway felt painfully long. Finally, she answered, "Maybe 2 months, maybe less," she said gently. Sarah froze. Her face lost all color. For a moment, she didn't move at all. Then she covered her mouth with her hands. Tears poured from her eyes. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I swear I'm trying so hard." The nurse reached out and touched her shoulder. "I know you are," she said kindly. "But the surgery costs $80,000. Sarah nodded slowly, as if she already knew the number by heart. "I've saved $12,000 so far," she said quietly. Ethan felt his stomach twist. 12,000. That meant she still needed 68,000 more. Sarah wiped her tears, but they kept coming. "I take every extra shift at the mansion. I clean houses during the day sometimes too." Her voice shook harder. "I skip meals so I can save money," she admitted. The nurse's eyes filled with sympathy. "You shouldn't be doing that," she said gently, but Sarah shook her head quickly. "I have to," she said firmly. "He's my son." Her voice cracked. "He's all I have." Ethan leaned against the wall as guilt slowly flooded his chest. He remembered how many times he had seen Sarah working late, how many times she refused overtime pay or extra food from the kitchen. At the time, he thought she was simply quiet and hard-working. Now he understood the truth. Every dollar mattered to her. Every hour of work meant another small step toward saving her child. Sarah took a shaky breath. "Is there any other option?" she asked the nurse. The nurse sadly shook her head. "The surgery is the only chance." Sarah closed her eyes tightly. For a moment, her body trembled as if she was trying not to collapse. "I won't give up," she whispered. "I'll find a way." The nurse squeezed her shoulder again. "You're one of the strongest mothers I've ever seen," she said softly. Sarah wiped her tears again. "I just want him to grow up," she whispered. "I want him to see him go to school, make friends, have a normal life." Her voice cracked again. "He deserves that." Ethan felt a sharp sting behind his eyes. The hallway suddenly felt too quiet, too heavy. Sarah slowly thanked the nurse and turned to leave. As she walked past Ethan's hiding spot again, he saw details he had never noticed before. Her coat looked thin and old. The fabric near the sleeves was worn. Her shoes were nearly falling apart. And her face looked tired beyond words, not just from work, but from fear, from worry, from fighting a battle every single day alone. Ethan watched her walk toward the hospital exit. Each step looked slow and drained. When she disappeared through the doors, Ethan remained standing there. His mind replayed everything he had just heard. $80,000. To him, that amount was nothing. He spent more than that on business dinners, luxury watches, and private flights. But to Sarah, that number stood between life and death for her child. Ethan slowly ran a hand across his face. "How did I not see this?" he whispered to himself. For 2 years she had worked in his home. 2 years, and he never once asked about her life, never once asked if she needed help, never once noticed the pain she carried every single day. The billionaire who prided himself on understanding people suddenly realized he had completely overlooked the most important thing happening right inside his own house. Ethan looked down the hallway toward the room where the boy slept. The small beeping machines echoed faintly. In that moment, something inside Ethan Cole changed forever. For the first time in many years, money didn't feel like power. It felt like responsibility. The next morning, the mansion looked exactly the same as always. Sunlight poured through the enormous windows. The marble floors shined. The house staff moved quietly through the hallways, doing their daily tasks. But for Ethan Cole, everything felt different. He sat at the long dining table, staring at a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. His mind was still inside that hospital room. He kept seeing the small boy lying in bed. He kept hearing Sarah's trembling voice. "I just want my son to live." Ethan rubbed his forehead slowly. For the first time in years, his usual business meetings didn't feel important. Money, contracts, investments, none of it seemed to matter as much as the image of that sick child. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. Sarah quietly entered the kitchen area with her cleaning supplies. Her eyes looked red and tired, but she still forced a small professional smile when she saw Ethan. "Good morning, sir," she said politely, respectful but exhausted. Ethan looked at her carefully. The same woman who worked silently every day. The same woman who fought every night to save her son. "Good morning, Sarah," he replied gently, serious but calm. She immediately began cleaning the counter. Her movements were fast and efficient, just like always. But Ethan noticed something now. Her hands trembled slightly. Her shoulders looked heavy. She was carrying far more weight than anyone in this mansion realized. "Sarah," Ethan said suddenly. She stopped cleaning and turned to face him. "Yes, sir?" she asked, nervous. Ethan stood up slowly from the table. His heart beat harder than he expected. For a moment he struggled to find the right words. Finally, he spoke. "I followed you last night," he said quietly. Honest confession. The room went completely silent. Sarah's face instantly turned pale. Her eyes widened with fear. I'm so sorry, sir," she said quickly, panicked. She lowered her head. "I didn't mean to hide anything from you. I promise my personal life won't affect my work." Tears began forming in her eyes. "Please don't fire me," she added softly, desperate. Ethan felt a painful knot in his chest. "Sarah, look at me," he said gently. Slowly she lifted her eyes. They were filled with fear, exhaustion, and sadness. Ethan walked closer and placed a large envelope on the kitchen table. "Your son," he said quietly, heavy emotion. Sarah's breathing stopped for a moment. "My son," she whispered, shocked and afraid. Tears immediately rolled down her cheeks. "Yes," she said softly, crying. "He's sick." Her voice shook. "The doctors say he needs surgery." She wiped her face quickly as if embarrassed. "I'm trying to save money," she explained, trembling voice. "I work every hour I can." Her hands clenched together nervously. It's expensive, but I won't give up." Ethan slowly pushed the envelope toward her. "Open it," he said calmly. She looked confused. "What is it?" she asked, uncertain. "Just open it," Ethan repeated softly. Her hands trembled as she picked up the envelope. Slowly she pulled out the paper inside. The moment her eyes saw the number written on the check, her entire body froze. Her lips parted in disbelief. Her hands began shaking uncontrollably. $80,000, she whispered. Shocked silence. She looked up at Ethan as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Sir, this must be a mistake," she said weakly, confused and overwhelmed. Ethan shook his head slowly. "No mistake," he replied quietly. Sarah stared at the check again. Tears poured down her face. I can't accept this," she said, overwhelmed with emotion. "This is too much." Ethan's voice softened. "Sarah," he said gently, "for 2 years you've worked in my home." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You cleaned my floors. You cooked meals. You made sure everything ran perfectly." Sarah lowered her head, crying quietly. "And all that time," Ethan continued, "you were fighting a battle alone." He took a slow breath. "You were trying to save your son." Sarah covered her face as her crying grew louder. "I didn't know what else to do," she sobbed, crying with pain. "I was scared every day." Her voice broke. "I thought I was going to lose him." Ethan stepped closer. "No mother should have to fight that battle alone," he said firmly, compassionate. Sarah suddenly dropped to her knees. Thank you," she cried, grateful and overwhelmed. Ethan immediately bent down and helped her stand. "You don't have to thank me," he said gently. "You've already earned this." She shook her head quickly. "No one has ever helped me like this," she said, emotional. Her hand still held the check tightly. My son can live now," she whispered, tears of hope. Ethan smiled softly. "Go to him," he said. "Your son needs his mother." Sarah wiped her tears and rushed toward the door. Before leaving, she turned back. "I will never forget this," she said, sincere gratitude. Then she hurried out of the mansion. Weeks passed, and Ethan found himself thinking about the boy often. One afternoon, he drove to the hospital again. This time, the building didn't look as cold as before. As he walked through the hallway, he suddenly heard fast footsteps behind him. "Mr. Cole," a familiar voice called, excited. He turned around. Sarah ran toward him with tears in her eyes, but these tears were different. "They did the surgery," she said breathlessly, joyful. "And it worked." Her face glowed with happiness. "The doctors say he's going to recover." Ethan felt relief wash over him. "That's incredible news," he said, deep relief. Sarah grabbed his hands gratefully. "You saved his life," she said, emotional. Ethan shook his head slowly. "No," he replied softly. "You did. You never gave up." Sarah smiled through her tears. "Come meet him," she said happily. Inside the hospital room, the little boy sat up in bed. He looked weak but much healthier than before. "Mom said you helped me," the boy said shyly. Ethan smiled. "I just helped a little," he replied warmly. The boy grinned. "When I grow up, I want to help people too," he said proudly, innocent determination. Ethan felt his heart grow warm. As he left the hospital later that day, he paused in the hallway. For years, he believed money was the greatest power in the world, but now he understood something deeper. Money alone means nothing. Its true value comes from what it can do for others. And sometimes, the greatest miracle is simply choosing to care about someone's pain.